She kicked us out into the snow with the baby in her arms. My mom said we were dead to her, and her boyfriend smiled as we froze. The police came and believed her. I was silent all my life. But this time I told everything. My name is Jessica. I'm 28 years old. I have a 2-year-old son named Dylan, and I used to believe that family meant safety. It was the end of January when everything truly fell apart. The kind of cold that bites through your coat and rattles in your lungs. My husband, Tyler, was still limping from a work injury he got months ago before they fired him under the guise of downsizing. I was on unpaid maternity leave that had already stretched too long. We had no money. No backup plan. Just a baby, a car with a bad alternator, and my mother's front porch. We never planned to stay with her for long. A couple of weeks tops. Until our tax return hit, or until one of us found work. But from the moment we crossed the threshold into her house in suburban Ohio, it felt like we were trespassing. Her boyfriend, Ray, made that clear with every look. He was shirtless in the middle of winter, beer belly out and eyes always too slow to leave me. The first time I caught him watching me breastfeed, I laughed it off. That nervous, twitchy laugh you learn when you're a woman in a house that doesn't feel like yours. I adjusted my hoodie, turned away. He didn't stop staring. I told my mom. Her eyes narrowed like I had personally insulted her. Don't you dare accuse him, she snapped. You think everyone's out to get you because you're too lazy to do anything with your life. Then came the slap. Not hard, not enough to leave a mark, but enough to take the breath from my chest. I hadn't been slapped since I was 15. But it wasn't the sting of her hand that broke me. It was the look on her face. Like she'd been waiting for an excuse. That night she dumped her clothes on the lawn right on top of the snow where they started to freeze. Dylan was screaming in his little winter coat, too tired to understand why we weren't inside anymore. Tyler begged. He actually begged her, standing on her front porch, holding our son, while her boyfriend stood behind her smirking. Ray said he'd call the cops. And then he did. When the police came, I had hope for exactly 30 seconds. Until they spoke to my mom first. Until I saw one of them nod, glance at me like I was something they had to clean off their boots. She says you're causing a disturbance, one officer told Tyler. You've got 10 minutes. We slept in our car that night. We wrapped Dylan in every piece of clothing we could find. I held his feet in my lap and blew on them to keep them warm. Tyler didn't say a word. He just stared out the window, his breath fogging up the glass. We didn't cry. We couldn't afford to. I watched the house. Her house. Lights on. Warm. Safe. And I knew we were never going back. After that night, I stopped believing that rock bottom had a floor. The next morning we drove to a gas station on the edge of town. I splashed my face in the bathroom sink while Dylan sat on the grimy floor, playing with the empty snack wrapper I gave him as a distraction. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself, hollow-eyed, cheeks gaunt, lips cracked from the cold. I kept trying to rehearse what I'd say to Amanda. My sister. My big sister. She was always the golden child. Amanda got straight A's without even trying, had a separate bedroom in high school while I shared a converted laundry room. Mom praised her for her ambition, for her maturity, but it was code for something else. She didn't question anything. She went to community college, found a boyfriend who wore polos and worked in IT, bought a house in the good part of town. Mom bragged about Amanda like she was a trophy she'd sculpted herself. Me? I got pregnant at 25. Married Tyler, who worked construction and smelled like sweat and wood glue. I wanted a quiet life. I wanted love. That was my rebellion. But that morning, I still believed Amanda might help. We parked across the street from her house, a tidy gray bungalow with wind chimes and one of those cute little welcome signs by the door. I told Tyler to wait in the car with Dylan. He was already coughing from the cold air, and I couldn't bear the idea of exposing him to another rejection in real time. Amanda opened the door in her slippers, holding a mug with some sarcastic quote printed on it. Jess, she blinked. What are you doing here? Her boyfriend, Sean, appeared behind her, hovering like backup. I got right to the point. I told her we just needed a couch. 2 weeks tops. Just until we got our tax return. I said it twice so she wouldn't think I was hinting at a longer stay. Her face twisted the way it always did when something made her uncomfortable. Like she just smelled sour milk. I'm sorry, she said, but her voice was tight. That's not my problem, Jess. I couldn't speak. For a second I thought I misheard her. I'd spent the last 12 hours watching frost form on the inside of our windshield. My baby had slept on a pillowcase wrapped around my arm. And my own sister, standing in a heated house with a fireplace behind her, said it wasn't her problem? She leaned forward like she was offering some kind of secret. Mom said you're using the baby as an excuse to be lazy. She said Tyler's faking his injury. That you're trying to manipulate everyone. I took a step back. Not because of what she said, but because she believed it. I don't remember how I got back to the car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the key in the ignition. Tyler didn't ask what happened. He just started driving. Dylan was asleep again in the back seat, cheeks flushed with fever. We went to the ER that night. They gave Dylan antibiotics and a stern warning about exposure in cold weather. I lied and said we'd lost heat in our apartment. The nurse squinted at me. I know she knew. The hospital social worker came the next morning. That's how we ended up in the shelter. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, no crack pipes or rats or screaming people. Just quiet desperation. Women with babies. Teenagers trying to look tough. A man in a corner who hadn't spoken a word the entire time we were there. There were rules, lights out at 9, chores every day, no guests. But there was heat. There were blankets. And for the first time in weeks I slept more than 2 hours in a row. One night, after I put Dylan to bed and Tyler was scrubbing floors as part of our assigned chores, I opened Facebook on the shared shelter computer. I stared at the empty status box for a long time before typing. A few weeks ago, my mom threw me, my husband, and our 2-year-old son out into the snow. I was still recovering from birth. We had nowhere to go. She told me I was dead weight and that my son was a burden. Her boyfriend used to watch me while I breastfed. When I told her, she slapped me. That night, she called the cops on us. I didn't name names. But I didn't lie. I hit post before I could change my mind. Within hours, it started to spread. I didn't expect the post to go viral. That night, I left the shelter's computer lab with my stomach churning. I thought maybe a couple of friends would see it. Maybe a few distant cousins would message something vague and sympathetic. I thought I might regret it. That I'd feel exposed. But when I checked again the next morning, there were hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments. Messages piling into my inbox like a flood I hadn't prepared for. At first, it was mostly people from high school. Girls I hadn't spoken to in a decade saying they always knew something was off about my mom. A guy I barely remembered messaged, I lived down the block from you growing up. Your house was always quiet in a creepy way. Then came the deeper ones. A woman who said she used to babysit Amanda and me when we were little. She told me your mom used to brag that she could go to the bar and leave you two alone for hours if she bribed you with TV dinners. I had no memory of that. But I believed her. And then one message made my whole body freeze. Hi. I don't want to stir things up, but your mom once offered me her pain meds in exchange for wine. I didn't accept. But I always wondered what else was going on. It came from our old neighbor, Ms. Darlene. She used to bring over cookies when I was a kid. I remember her sitting on the porch with my mom, smoking menthols and talking about their exes. I hadn't thought about her in years. But her message hit like ice water. I realized then, I wasn't the only one who saw the cracks. I was just the first one to say it out loud. Tyler was quiet when I showed him the post. I think part of him worried we were stirring up trouble we didn't need. But I saw the way he looked at Dylan's cheeks, still red from his cough, and I knew he understood. Then, 3 days after the post, something I never expected happened. CPS reached out. They said they'd seen the post. Someone had forwarded it. The woman on the line sounded careful, rehearsed. She said they weren't accusing anyone. But they were concerned. They asked about the conditions Dylan had been living in. About Ray. About the slap. About everything. I answered honestly. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From adrenaline. From the weight of all the things I'd kept buried for too long finally being heard. That same night, almost to the minute, I got a text from my mom. How dare you? You are destroying this family's name. Your lies are disgusting. You're dead to me. She hadn't contacted me in months. Not when Dylan was sick. Not when we were homeless. Not when we'd moved into the shelter. But now that someone might look at her sideways, she found her voice. I stared at her message and felt nothing. No guilt. No fear. Just this hollow ache of knowing I had begged her for warmth while she protected a man who ogled her daughter. A man who threatened her grandchild. I didn't reply. I don't think she expected me to. That night, I sat on the shelter cot, listening to Dylan's soft breathing, and I thought about silence. How many years I spent pretending things were okay. How many times I bit my tongue at Thanksgiving or smiled when Amanda talked about Mom like she was some sweet, misunderstood angel. There was a time I thought silence was the right thing. That I had to protect my mom. That family loyalty meant swallowing the truth. That if I just kept my head down, eventually she'd soften. Eventually, things would get better. But the truth started leaking out anyway. In the way Dylan flinched at loud voices. In Tyler's clenched jaw. In the nights I stared at the ceiling, listening to the buzz of the heater and wondering what would have happened if I hadn't spoken up. Maybe I destroyed something. Maybe the family name isn't worth saving. But Dylan? He is. I won't lie for her anymore. Not to myself. Not to him. Even if no one else ever believes me, I will remember everything. After the CPS call, the silence settled in like fog. Thick. Heavy. Unnatural. No more texts from my mom. Nothing from Amanda. I kept waiting for some kind of aftershock, a knock on the shelter door, a letter, a threat. But there was only quiet. The kind that starts to feel like gaslighting. Like maybe I'd imagined it all. Maybe I was overreacting. But then Dylan started asking about Grandma. It was after lights out, just a faint whisper in the dark. Why we don't go to Grandma's no more? My heart twisted so fast I nearly choked. I turned to face him on the cot, brushing the curls from his forehead. He was so little. So innocent. And in his world, things just happened without reason. People came and went. Homes disappeared. The cold was just cold, not punishment. He didn't know about betrayal yet. Not really. I told him Grandma was busy. I told him we were going to find a new place soon. A better place. I didn't tell him she called him a burden. I didn't tell him she threw his blanket into the snow. I didn't tell him about the look in her eyes when she slammed the door on us. I still can't say those things out loud to him. But the shelter counselor told me this was the part no one prepares you for, the emotional limbo. When you're not surviving anymore, but you're not really living either. You're just stuck between versions of yourself. The woman who begged her mother for help and the one who learned to stop begging. Tyler tried to get work, but with his limp, most places turned him away. "We'll call you" became our daily mantra. I picked up a few shifts cleaning offices through a shelter contact. I'd get up before sunrise, wipe down desks while staring at photos of strangers' smiling families, then come back to eat oatmeal off a styrofoam tray. It was humbling. It was exhausting. But it was ours. One night, while Dylan was asleep and Tyler was out filling out more job applications, I found myself scrolling through the Facebook post again. Over 1,200 shares. Comments still coming in. One woman wrote, "I left my mom too. She chose her boyfriend over me and my daughter. I thought I was alone. Thank you for sharing this." Another wrote, "My sister sided with my mom too. Some people are addicted to being the favorite." It didn't make me feel better. But it made me feel less invisible. That's when I got the second message from CPS. They wanted to do a home visit with her. They weren't accusing her, they said. Just due diligence. They'd be visiting the house, speaking to both her and Ray. My blood went cold. I knew what that meant. It meant she was about to spin the story of her life. The devoted mother who took in her lazy daughter. The ungrateful girl who fabricated a sob story online. The boyfriend who never said a word out of place. She put on her Sunday best. Cry if she needed to. She'd probably bake cookies. And they believe her. The way the cops did. I wanted to scream. But the truth is, I knew this was coming. People like my mother don't get exposed in a single social media post. They're masters of the mask. The perfect smile. The tilted head. The wounded voice. And people want to believe them. Because the alternative is messy. It means mothers can be cruel. It means family isn't always safe. It means maybe we're not the problem, we were just born into the wrong hands. I sat with that feeling until my legs went numb. And then I opened a new document. I started writing everything down. The breastfeeding incident. The slap. The night on the lawn. The exact words she said. How her voice sounded. What her face looked like. I wasn't doing it for CPS. Not really. I was doing it for me. And maybe someday for Dylan. Because if they believed her, I needed to remember the truth. Exactly as it happened. Word for word. The day of the visit, I couldn't focus. My stomach churned with this sick, electric dread, like the kind you get before a dentist appointment, but worse. Tyler could sense it too. He tried to distract me, talking about maybe applying for work out of state somewhere warmer. Somewhere we could start over. But I couldn't stop picturing my mom opening the door to CPS with that fake little smile of hers. The one she used on neighbors, on teachers, on the men who floated in and out of her life. Ray would be just behind her, maybe in a collared shirt for once. She gestured to the clean living room. Fresh Lysol in the air. Photos of Amanda on the mantel. Nothing of me. Nothing of Dylan. She'd pour coffee, laugh lightly, act confused when they brought up the accusations. I'm just heartbroken, I imagined her saying. Jessica's always had a flair for dramatics. She used to make up stories even as a little girl. I told her she could stay here. I did everything I could. I could almost hear her voice tremble with practiced pain. She makes poor choices. I know how this works. I've lived it. The way people believe what's easier to believe. That the neat house means a good mother. That if you look put together, you must be the stable one. But I also knew I had one advantage this time. The internet doesn't forget. I documented everything in that post. Dated it. Screen capped it. Collected the messages people sent. I had receipts. Not just of what she did, but of how others had seen her too. Still, the wait was unbearable. 3 days after the visit, CPS called me again. This time, the woman's voice was different. Careful, but not dismissive. We spoke to your mother and her partner, she said. There were some inconsistencies. My heart jumped. She went on to say they had noticed defensive behavior. A refusal to let them into certain parts of the house. An odd dynamic between Ray and my mother. That my mom had refused to answer some questions and kept steering the conversation toward Amanda and her success. And most notably, my mother couldn't explain why she hadn't contacted me once since kicking us out. We're not here to make assumptions, she said, but we are opening an inquiry. There may be patterns worth looking into. I almost dropped the phone. Not because they were investigating, but because someone believed me. I hung up and just sat there in the quiet shelter room. Dylan was napping on the cot, one hand curled around his stuffed bear. Tyler was out on another interview. I had no one to tell right then, but it didn't matter. Something shifted in me. For so long I thought my voice didn't count unless someone else approved of it. That if I screamed and no one listened, maybe I was crazy. Maybe I was too sensitive. But now someone had listened. They didn't call me a liar. They didn't brush it off. They looked at her and saw through it. And that meant the world. Later that night, I told Tyler. He looked like he was holding his breath the whole time. Then he just nodded and said, maybe this is the start. We didn't celebrate. There wasn't money for that. But we held hands in the dark a little longer than usual. And when Dylan woke up coughing and whimpered for me, I picked him up, rocked him, and whispered, we're gonna be okay. I promise. I don't know where this road leads. I don't know if CPS will dig deep or back away the second it gets messy. But I know this, I'm not that girl on the porch anymore, begging to be let back inside. I'm not dead weight. And my son is not a burden. He is the reason I got up every day, even when I didn't want to. He is the reason I opened my mouth and told the truth. And now the world is starting to listen. The inquiry stretched out longer than I expected. Weeks passed, and while CPS didn't share details, they kept in touch. They asked for documentation, photos, messages, even the police report from the night we were thrown out. I hadn't looked at that report since it happened. Seeing it again, no evidence of disturbance. Family dispute resolved on scene. Made my blood boil. Resolved. As if trauma could be tidied up like dishes in a sink. But I sent it anyway. I sent everything. Tyler finally got a part-time job doing inventory at a warehouse across town. The pay wasn't much, but it was something. It meant bus rides at 5 a.m. and sore knees by dinner, but he never complained. Not once. Every night, he came back to the shelter with a new story about some guy at work who'd helped him, or how he beat his own record unloading pallets. He was holding on to hope with both hands, even when mine slipped. I'd picked up more hours cleaning. Sometimes I'd come back so tired I couldn't feel my feet. But I'd sit with Dylan and trace little animals in the books we got from the shelter's donation bin. Every page I read to him felt like a defiance. You still get a childhood, kid. Even if it's here. Even if it's hard. Then came a letter, an official one. CPS had scheduled a formal interview with my mother and Ray. According to the worker I spoke with, more concerns had come up. Apparently, a former neighbor reached out to them after seeing my post. Someone who remembered seeing Dylan cry on the porch that night. Someone who remembered my mom bragging about finally getting her house back. I don't know who it was. I may never know. But that person, they gave me something I didn't realize I needed. Validation. For so long I've questioned my memory. Wondered if I'd exaggerated it all. If maybe I provoked her. If maybe I was too emotional, too demanding. Because that's what she always told me. That I made things harder. That I imagined things. That my feelings were a bit much. But someone else had seen it too. Someone else remembered. Amanda never reached out. Not once. After I posted our story, she removed me from Facebook. I saw a photo of her and Mom at a wine tasting a few weeks later. Their smiles looked like matching masks. I wondered what Amanda believed. If she'd convinced herself I was just bitter and broke. If she told herself she had to protect her peace. Maybe it's easier to side with the person who has the power. But when I think of my sister now, I don't feel hate. I feel this hollow ache for the girl she used to be, the one who used to sneak me cookies at night when Mom was passed out, who covered for me when I missed curfew. That version of her is gone. Or maybe she just got tired of trying. One night, in the quiet shelter room, Dylan curled up against me and whispered, "Mama, I like it here." I almost cried. Not because I wanted to stay, but because he felt safe. We'd created that, even in a place with thin walls and plastic chairs and a broken vending machine that never took singles. We'd created safety. We'd done that on our own. I don't know what's coming next. CPS said they would keep us informed, but there are no promises. My mom will twist and lie and play the victim until her voice is raw. Ray will smirk and shrug and maybe walk away without a scratch. But I'm not afraid of them anymore. The fear used to live inside my bones. It used to dictate every choice. But now it's just a ghost in the corner, quieter each day. I started looking at apartments last week. Just browsing, nothing serious yet. But I bookmarked one, a tiny 2-bedroom in an old building with a rusted swing set out back. The rent's low, the neighborhood's rough, but it has light. Big windows. Space to breathe. And for the first time in months, I let myself imagine a door that opened for us. A place we wouldn't be kicked out of. A home we built. We signed the lease on a rainy Tuesday in March. The sky was the color of dishwater, and the office smelled like old coffee and mildew, but I didn't care. The apartment was small, bare floors, creaky cabinets, walls thin enough to hear the neighbors sneeze, but when the landlord handed me the keys, something in my chest cracked open. I turned the brass in my hand and realized this was the first time I'd ever held a key to a place that was mine. Not my mother's. Not a borrowed couch. Not a temporary shelter. Ours. Tyler cried when we stepped inside. Not the kind of crying that needs comforting, just quiet tears, like his body was finally releasing everything it had been holding in. He dropped to his knees and kissed the floor. Dylan laughed and ran from room to room, shouting, "This mine. This mine." "Yes, baby. It is." We moved in with barely anything, 2 bags of clothes, a couple boxes of donated pantry food, a battered pack-and-play for Dylan to sleep in. But the walls were clean. The heat worked. And no one told us we were a burden. On our second night there, I sat on the floor and read Dylan his favorite book while the wind howled outside. The sound reminded me of that night, our first in the car, watching snow coat our belongings like a burial. It felt like a different lifetime. Like it happened to a girl I barely recognized. And yet the scars were still there. Not on my skin, but deeper. In the way I flinched every time I heard a man laugh too loudly. And how I checked the locks 3 times before bed. And the ache I still felt when I saw a mother holding her daughter's hand without flinching. A few days after we moved in, I got a final call from CPS. They said the case was closed. But not because they dismissed it. Because after multiple interviews, they had reasonable cause to suspect emotional neglect, and had placed my mother and Ray under monitoring. Apparently, they'd caught Ray in multiple lies. Mom had slipped too, saying things that contradicted her original story. There was no formal charge, but there would be follow-up visits. Oversight. Eyes. It wasn't justice, not exactly. But it was something. A record. A warning. And for the first time in my life, my mother was being watched. She didn't message me again. Neither did Amanda. I think they told themselves I ruined everything. That I was vindictive. Dramatic. Dangerous. But I've stopped trying to rewrite myself for their comfort. I'm not here to be palatable anymore. I'm here to live. I got a new job last week, cleaning at a retirement home nearby. The hours are early and the pay still low, but it comes with a perk. The residents talk to me. They tell me stories, ask about Dylan, call me sweetheart. After so much silence, even the smallest kindness feels like a door creaking open. Sometimes I think about writing more. About sharing our story in a bigger way. Because if it happened to me, it's happening to someone else right now. A mother. A daughter. A woman curled up in the corner of her own childhood home, wondering what she did to deserve the cold. To her, I would say this. It wasn't your fault. You weren't too much. You didn't imagine it. You can leave. You can survive. And one day, your child will run barefoot across the scratched-up floors of your tiny new apartment, laughing like the world never broke your heart. And in that moment, you'll know you won. You'll know you won. I still don't speak to my mother. I probably never will. Dylan doesn't ask about her as much anymore. And when he does, I keep it simple. We don't see Grandma right now, sweetheart. But we have each other. That's enough for him. And these days? That's enough for me too.